Hello guys, welcome back to our anime moment. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Renegade Immortal episode number 191 based on novel. So let's start. Wang Lin withdrew his gaze, so Wang Ping couldn't see the sadness in his eyes. No one knew the real reason he wouldn't let Wang Ping cultivate. Sun Tai didn't know, Wang Ping didn't know, only Wang Lin himself knew the real reason. He was unable to tell Wang Ping. For Wang Ping's sake, he couldn't. This had nothing to do with Liu Mai. Wang Ping couldn't hear Wang Lin's sigh. Wang Lin silently pondered as he looked at the wilderness outside. Inside the carriage, Wang Ping was also like this. The silence between the father and son became even stronger. After a long time, Wang Ping turned his head and looked at his father. From the side, his father's face seemed to have even more wrinkles. His heart couldn't stand it anymore and he softly said, "Father, I was wrong." Wang Lin turned around. He revealed a kind smile but didn't speak. Vast Water City was the sub-capital city of one of the three great empires on planet Renyun, and it was second only to the capital in prosperity. It was also near the river, so it was a very lively city. The carriage entered the city and stopped at a station. Wang Lin and Wang Ping got off the carriage and entered this bustling city. Wang Ping had never seen such a lively and big city. As he looked around, he seemed to forget all the unhappiness from before. Wang Lin stepped into a rather lavish restaurant in the eastern part of the city. The waiter inside the restaurant hurried over with a smile and led the father and son to a table near the window. Not long after, wine and food were brought over. It might have been because Wang Ping's appearance was too handsome, but after he sat down, he immediately caught the attention of a lot of the women in the restaurant. As for Wang Ping, he had long grown accustomed to this during his boyhood back in the village. Wang Lin didn't move his chopsticks, but he picked up the wine and calmly drank. As for Wang Ping, he only tasted the dishes. Wang Lin put down the wine and calmly said, "From now on, we will live here. First, we will need to buy a house." Wang Ping nodded and smiled. "Dad, this place is pretty good. After spending so much time on seeing mountains and rivers, I felt like I suddenly entered the world when we came into this bustling city." Just as Wang Ping finished speaking, a sneer came from a table nearby. There were three people sitting at that table. One of them was an old man wearing silk who looked very dignified. Although his eyes were dim, when he opened them, he gave off a noble aura. Beside him sat two people, one male and one female. The man was very handsome and dignified. He wore a purple robe with golden lines embroidered on it. It looked very expensive. As for the woman, she was about in her 20s with black hair like a waterfall. Although she wasn't an absolute beauty, she gave off a very refreshing feeling. The person who sneered was the man in purple. The man in purple turned toward the woman beside him and laughed. "This silly boy is interesting. It's his first time entering Vast Water City and he starts spouting nonsense, like being accustomed to seeing mountains and rivers and his first time entering the world. Nonsense." He didn't talk loudly, but said it so those words could enter Wang Ping's ears. Wang Ping frowned but didn't say a word. As for Wang Lin, he picked up the jug and drank a mouthful. His gaze seemed to randomly sweep the three people at that table. The woman frowned and softly asked, "Is it funny?" The young man laughed. "Junior apprentice Sister Qing Yi, why it is not funny?" The woman revealed a trace of annoyance and turned her head. The young man let out a cold snort. The reason he laughed at Wang Ping was because when he entered, this always cold woman actually raised her head and looked at Wang Ping. If not for this woman, how could he eat in a place like this given his status? When he saw her expression, he let out a cold snort, turned around, and stared at Wang Ping. The young man in purple softly said, "If his appearance was born on a woman, she would definitely be an enchanting girl. Unfortunately, it is on a male, truly unfortunate, but for him to be a prostitute, he'd be pretty good." The repeated provocations made Wang Ping put down his chopsticks. He turned his head to look at the youth and said, "What a good face. If it was born to a person, he would be very handsome. It's a pity it was born to a bastard, what a pity." The young man in purple's expression sank, but before he could speak, the old man next to him frowned and shouted, "Since when could people like this come into the Jingye Xian? No manners at all. Just let this old man teach you a lesson or two." As the old man spoke, he threw his chopsticks and they flew out like bolts of lightning. He was aiming for Wang Ping's shoulders. If the pair of chopsticks really hit, then Wang Ping's hands would be wasted. At the moment the old man threw the chopsticks, the woman beside them exclaimed. She stood up and was about to chase after the chopsticks. However, at the moment the chopsticks closed in, they immediately lost their strength and softly landed next to Wang Ping. Wang Lin's eyes were cold as he put down the wine and coldly stared at the old man. One glance. The old man's body started as if countless bolts of thunder had exploded in his mind. That gaze was like a sharp sword that pierced into his whole being through his eyes. It broke through his mind and entered his soul. It seemed like it wanted to shatter his soul, extinguish his core flame, and cause his golden core to shatter. The old man's body immediately stiffened as if a powerful bolt of lightning had just struck him. His hands and feet trembled uncontrollably. The old man's mind trembled and his scalp started tingling. There was intense pain coming from between his eyebrows. It was as if a blade had pierced through his skull. The sound of his heart violently beating instantly echoed through the old man's body as if it was about to collapse. His body was covered in cold sweat as if he was about to face an enemy naked. His entire being was about to collapse from this one glance. A stream of blood that contained a trace of gold came out from the corner of his mouth. A crack had appeared in his core and his core energy had leaked into his bloodstream. The old man was a core formation cultivator. As for the young man in purple, he had only started chi condensation, and the woman hadn't reached the foundation establishment stage yet. Since a core formation cultivator could be so unscrupulous and act so viciously against a mortal, Wang Lin showed killing intent without any hesitation. Moreover, this old man had provoked his son. The chair the old man was sitting on cracked and he fell to the ground. His face was pale as he quickly took out pills to swallow and immediately crushed a message jade. The restaurant was completely silent as many guests were still in confusion. However, there were still some clever customers that quickly paid their bills and left. The young man in purple was completely startled. He didn't even look at the old man. Instead, his extremely gloomy eyes stared at Wang Lin and Wang Ping. As for the woman, she was in a complete daze as she stared at Wang Ping and Wang Lin. She never thought that such an event would take place. "I don't need you to teach my son." Wang Lin withdrew his gaze, picked up the wine jug, and took a gulp. The old man didn't dare to open his mouth, as his core energy had already escaped to his body. He feared that if he opened his mouth, his core energy would immediately disperse. In that case, if he didn't die, his cultivation level would drop greatly. The current him was completely relying on the pills he had swallowed earlier to help stop the loss of his core energy, but the effect was very little. Strands of spiritual energy came from his body. It looked like green mist. The young man in purple looked at Wang Lin and nodded. "Didn't expect you to be a cultivator. Very good. On planet Renyun, since you offended the Sun family, that is the same as." Before he could finish speaking, Wang Lin waved his right hand. The young man's body immediately trembled, his face turned pale instantly, and he fell on the ground. Wang Lin didn't kill him, as he didn't have much spiritual energy inside him and was still considered a mortal. With Wang Lin's experience, this young man in purple was either the direct descendant of a cultivation family or was of a noble bloodline among mortals. However, no matter what identity they had, Wang Lin didn't care. On planet Renyun, he was the supreme ancestor. The scene before him caused Wang Ping to gasp as he looked at his father. At this moment, he suddenly found out that his father was not an ordinary cultivator. Only a glance from his father was able to make the old man like this. Qing Yi stared at the father and son. After hesitating for a moment, she stepped forward and respectfully said, "Senior, it was us who were reckless." Wang Lin picked up the wine jug, took a sip, and didn't look at her. Qing Yin bit her lower lip. While she was in a dilemma, Wang Ping smiled. He was already very handsome, and now his smile made him even more beautiful. Wang Ping looked at Qing Yi and asked, "Miss, is your name Qing Yi?" "My name is Wang Ping." "Is Miss also a cultivator?" Wang Ping's smile made Qing Yi's face turn red and she softly said, "Yes, but Master has already said that before reaching the foundation establishment stage, I can't call myself a cultivator." "Your name is Wang Ping, right? Today's matter is our fault, it's just. You guys should quickly leave. Just now, Master crushed the message jade. I fear someone will arrive soon." Wang Ping faintly smiled. He didn't seem to care about this matter and began chatting with Qing Yi. Just at this moment, whistling sounds came from outside the restaurant. A powerful wind blew by and three old men suddenly appeared inside the restaurant. Qing Yi quickly and respectfully said, "Ancestor's son." One of the old men among the three had white hair and his eyes were like lightning. He gave off a sense of pressure without being angry. After entering the restaurant, his eyes swept past the core formation cultivator sitting on the ground. He withdrew his gaze and then looked at Wang Lin and Wang Ping. As far as he could see, Wang Lin was only a mortal without any spiritual energy. However, it was the young man that caused the old man's eyes to narrow. He took a closer look and his eyes revealed a strange color. This child's talent is excellent, although his body is that of a mortal. However, his soul seems to contain the world and is filled with might. This kind of mentality is rare even among cultivators. These two people definitely aren't as simple as they look on the surface. The core formation cultivator on the ground seemed to have noticed the old man's arrival and opened his eyes. He couldn't hold in the mouthful of core energy and let out a miserable hum. Mist came from all over his body, then his expression paled and he urgently said, "Uncle, it was him who harmed me, save me." He suddenly pointed at Wang Lin. The old man's right hand formed a seal and pointed at the old man. A seal flew out and landed between the old man's eyebrows. This spell immediately expanded and formed a seal that locked down the core energy that was escaping. After he finished all of this, he gloomily looked at Wang Lin and said, "Your method sure is ruthless. Do you think my son family will just sit idly when they hear about this?" Wang Lin didn't even look at the old man. He put down the wine jug and calmly said, "Ping, let's go." With that, he stood up and walked toward the exit. Wang Ping smiled at Qing Yi. When Qing Yi saw this smile, her face turned red. Wang Ping had very good feelings toward this girl. This feeling came from the fact that when her master acted against him, she tried to stop her master. After standing up, Wang Ping followed his father out the restaurant. The old man coldly snorted and stepped forth to stop them. The two old men beside him also did the same. "Let's finish speaking, then you can leave." Wang Lin's gaze was calm and he casually took a step. Although this step was simple, a thunderous roar echoed in the three old men's minds. It was as if this step didn't land on the ground but in their minds. The two people behind the old men were at the mid-stage of nascent soul. Their expressions changed greatly and then they immediately activated the spiritual energy inside their bodies and subconsciously took several steps back. This wasn't a Tao technique or spell, there wasn't even a sliver of celestial spiritual energy coming from Wang Lin's body. However, in the view of the three old men, it was something that far surpassed any spell they had seen. This was an aura that only appeared once someone had reached the peak of a generation. Anyone who had their own Tao contained the heavens and earth in their body. They could borrow the power of the heavens to create pressure. Not to mention the three old men, not even normal ascendant cultivators could resist this. The old man in the middle had the highest cultivation level, peak of the late stage of nascent soul. He was in the process of comprehending the heavens and was half a step into the soul formation stage. Wang Lin's aura was extremely profound in his eyes. It was as if his soul was directly impacted by Wang Lin, so his face turned pale and he took 2 steps back. Wang Lin walked past him and left the restaurant. Wang Ping followed, and at the moment he walked out of the restaurant, he turned around to look at Qing Yi and revealed a gentle smile. Qing Yi's face became even more red. "Just this once." Wang Lin's voice came from outside the restaurant and slowly echoed in the Sun family cultivators' ears. It was a long time before they recovered, and when they did, their eyes were filled with horror. After leaving the restaurant, Wang Ping hesitated for a bit before catching up to this father and smiling. Dad, do you know the Sun family? I had some encounters with them. Your father promised to shelter their family for a century. Wang Lin didn't hide anything from Wang Ping aside from the reason Wang Ping wasn't allowed to cultivate. That girl named Qing Yi isn't bad. Wang Lin looked at Wang Ping with a smile that was not a smile. Wang Ping was startled, and his handsome face showed a rare hint of red. Wang Lin and Wang Ping bought a large courtyard house in the northern part of vast Water City. After cleaning it for a bit, they settled down. This house was very big and had many rooms. When the previous owner sold it, they left behind some servant girls as well. At this moment, a huge commotion occurred in the Sun family branch in vast Water City due to Wang Lin's words. Since the Ran family's ancestor and carefree Shan Ren had disappeared, the Sun family took over the Ran family's position on planet Renyun due to Sun 11. They became even stronger than the past Ran family and became the #1 existence on the planet. During these 20 years of change, the people of the Sun family became arrogant. Vast Water City also had a branch of the Sun family. At this moment, 3 Soul Formation elders were sitting in the Sun branch family home's main hall. Before them stood all the people involved in the incident at the restaurant. This was the first time Qing Yi had been involved in a situation like this, so she was very nervous. She had her head lowered and had a respectful demeanor. Her master, the core formation cultivator, was standing beside her. However, his face was pale and his cultivation had fallen from the core formation stage to the late stage of foundation establishment. One of the Sun family elders was a red-faced old man. He slightly opened his eyes and gently said, "This person really said that?" The late-stage nascent soul old man who tried to stop Wang Lin quickly nodded and said, "Junior definitely didn't hear wrong. That person clearly said, just this once." A cold snort came out from a green-robed old man, then his eyes became cold and he said, "It seems someone wants to provoke my Sun family. This person can cause a core formation cultivator's core to collapse with one gaze and made 3 nascent soul cultivators retreat with 1 step. I fear he is at the soul transformation stage." The final elder calmly said, "What about a soul transformation cultivator? Our Sun family's ancestor is still here, and there is also that senior that will protect us for a century. Not even the Huan family from planet Thousand Illusion would dare to provoke that senior. With him around, our Sun family will not collapse." The red-faced elder spoke a second time. "What is this person's family name?" The cultivators remained silent for a long time. The late-stage nascent soul old man wryly smiled and said, "I don't know, but it seems this outer family member talked with them. Perhaps she would know." The red-faced elder's gaze fell on Qing Yi. "Do you know?" Qing Yi's body trembled. After pondering for a bit, she shook her head. "Junior doesn't know." "What guts?" The red-faced old man's eyes narrowed. With his experience, he was able to tell at a glance that the girl was lying. Qing Yi bitterly lowered her head and softly said, "Junior really doesn't know." The red-faced elder let out a cold snort, then he stood up and said, "Let's put this matter aside. I have already informed the family about this matter and they will send a soul transformation cultivator to deal with this. As for this outer family member, since there's someone else in her heart, kick her out of the Sun family. This old man wants to see on what basis this person dares to say such arrogant words as just this once. On planet Renyun, no one dares to speak like this to my Sun family." In the northern part of vast Water City, the new sign for Wang Lin's home had already been put up. Wang Lin personally wrote the 2 characters, Wang Mansion. Wang Lin didn't replace the servant girls in the mansion and kept using them. This way the mansion was a lot less lonely. Late at night, the moonlight fell. Wang Lin and Wang Ping were sitting across from each other in the back study. Wang Lin calmly said, "Ping 19 years of ordinary life, 8 years of adventure, and next I'll give you 30 years of wealth. A person's life contains joy and sorrow, you should know it all. Being rich and poor are also the same." Wang Ping silently pondered. After a long time, he faintly smiled. His eyes were bright as he asked, "Dad, is this the compensation for not letting me cultivate?" Wang Lin looked at Wang Ping and slowly said, yes. His gaze went over Wang Ping and fell into the distance outside the window. In a place where Wang Ping couldn't see, there was a hint of sadness in Wang Lin's eyes. This sadness was so strong that no one knew. Wang Lin couldn't reveal this secret no matter what, even though he knew that Wang Ping had buried his wish to cultivate along with a trace of resentment toward him. Ping, it is not that father doesn't want you to cultivate, but it's just, you can't cultivate, Wang Lin sighed in his heart. The sadness became even stronger. Wang Ping slowly asked, Dad, what is wealth? Wang Lin withdrew his gaze and calmly asked, what kind of wealth do you want? Dad taught me that a person should walk against the heavens and not be pressured by the world. Meet a mountain, climb over it, meet a river, go through it, meet an ocean, cross it, and never give in to the world. Since father doesn't want me to cultivate, then I want to become supreme ruler amongst mortals. Wang Ping looked at this father. If you want to, you can. Wang Lin closed his eyes. Wang Ping had grown up. Under Wang Lin's influence, he gradually gained his own beliefs and views on the world. He was no longer the child that always listened to his father, he now had his own thoughts and ideals. Wang Ping looked at his father and whispered, I don't want to be a supreme ruler that is handed to me, I want to obtain it myself. Wang Lin calmly said, yes. He waved his right hand and a shadow walked out from behind him and then walked into Wang Ping's shadow. With this, you can do anything on planet Ranyun. Wang Lin got up. He didn't look back at Wang Ping as he walked out of the study. His back looked a bit crestfallen. Wang Ping opened his mouth and seemed like he wanted to say something. However, in the end, he couldn't say it out loud and could only silently ask in his heart, Father, you can give me everything, so why won't you let me cultivate? Ping doesn't want to cultivate for himself but for the promise from back then. In order to accompany you forever. Father, you are so lonely. But why? As Wang Lin stood in the courtyard under the moonlight, his shadow was stretched very long. He turned to his own room, lied down on his bed, and softly said, one day you will understand. However, I hope that day will come slower. In fact, I hope you never find out why. That night, Wang Ping didn't sleep. 3 days later, a person arrived in Vastwater City. This person was wearing a black coat and looked rather old. After he arrived at Vastwater City, he went to the Sun family branch. All of the cultivators in the Sun branch family had come out to greet this cultivator. Even though they had already guessed that the person who would come must be a soul transformation cultivator, when the three elders saw who came, they all gasped and became even more respectful. Greetings, Vice Family Head. This person was Sun Chiming. Because of Wang Lin's matter, his status in the family had increased. Also, his cultivation had already reached the late stage of soul transformation, so he was promoted by Sun 11 to become the next family head. Sun Chiming didn't speak any nonsense and directly asked, where is the person? These people in the family didn't know the meaning of being able to break a core with just one gaze, but he was well aware. Even though he could do it, he couldn't cause 3 nascent soul cultivators to retreat with just one step without using any spells. This kind of thing could be explained if a spell was used, however, if what the Jade said was true and no spell was used, then this kind of thing could only be done by an old monster at the ascendant stage. It was absolutely impossible for an ordinary cultivator to do this. This video will end here.